I'm Walter Baethgen. I'm the head of the Regional and Sectorial Research Program, and I will be introducing the 3 webinars that are going to be given here at the IRI. The main idea of the webinars is to discuss how climate information, tools, and products can inform decisions, plans, policies, etc. My introductory webinar will discuss the 3 topics that will be discussed in the 3 webinars that are coming after this one. And then I will discuss a little bit the challenges, some of the challenges that we find when trying to incorporate climate information, products and tools into actual decision making, planning and policies. Hello, my name is Walter Baethgen. I'm the head of the Regional and Sectorial Research Program at the IRI, the International Research Institute for Climate and Society, and the Earth Institute at Columbia University. This is an introductory talk for the webinar series on climate resilient development. And in this presentation, I will discuss climate change, climate risks, and development programs. Now, we are aware that as development practitioners, you face a difficult challenge, and that is to try to incorporate the best available knowledge in the development programs. We are also aware that communication between scientific knowledge generators and implementing agents is not always easy. In our experience, the successful case studies are those that take advantage of existing knowledge chains or knowledge networks. That is, institutions and individuals that generate scientific knowledge in good communication with institutions or individuals that translate, tailor that scientific information, and in communication with institutions and individuals that apply that knowledge in operational modes for establishing policy, for development programs. Now, when this process works fine, then there is a very healthy situation in which the implementers start demanding new knowledge, and that new knowledge is translated into new research questions for the knowledge generators. What we are finding out is that some of the most difficult challenges are found in this central pink box. That is the translators, the people tailoring information. We think that we may be needing a new type of scientist, a new type of professional, able to take this scientific knowledge and tailor, translate it into information that is understandable, usable, relevant, actionable by the implementers' communities. Now, of course, in reality, these information networks are much more complex than those simplified chains, and actually much more complex than the figure shown in this slide. But we strongly believe that if we want to inform stakeholders, end users, governments, development agencies, we need to understand these networks. We need to understand the processes, the links. We need to identify links that are missing or links that are weak, and then try to create those that are missing and to strengthen those that are weak. Very often we find out that in the process of trying to inform decision-making policy with science, people tend to skip links, and usually the results of that is not very effective, it's not very good. Now, we are basing our webinars in a few premises. The first one is that we strongly believe that decisions, plans, policies will be better if they are better informed. Now, in the case of climate information, there's lots of information available, often in excess. And that is that poses challenges to implementers, to practitioners. And so they ask the question, which of all of this information is based on good science? Which of this information is useful? What is usable? What is relevant? And so one of the objectives of these webinars is to help practitioners in this process. So we want to assist practitioners to understand science behind information. And for example, development efforts must consider adaptation to climate change. But then the first question that a practitioner asks is, adapt to what? What will future climate look like? The best tools available that we have for projecting possible future climate is the climate models, the GCMs. And one of the webinars will be oriented to discuss these climate models. Now, these are clearly the best models from the climate science community for projecting climate scenarios of the future, but they have limitations. Some of those limitations are related to scientific knowledge gaps. This is science advancing, and there's still lots to learn of how to improve these models. Another limitation is that in order to use these climate models to project future climate, we need to make assumptions on greenhouse gas emissions for the next 50 or 100 years. So we need to imagine the world in the next 50 or 100 years. What energy sources will be used? How many people will be in the planet? What will be the deforestation rates? So it's very difficult to imagine the world in the next 50 to 100 years. And that is a source of uncertainty. And uncertainties will be the subject of another webinar of this series. The uncertainties of future climate projections are large at global level, but they're even larger at regional level, for example, for precipitation. If we take as an example East Africa, where 90% of the models agree that the climate will be wetter, and then you look at the individual runs of the models, you see that yes, 90% of the models agree that the climate will be wetter, but there is a huge spread in the individual runs. Actually, some of the models are suggesting that climate may be drier. And this is for large windows, like the entire East Africa region. But practitioners typically need information at the local level. And at the local level, uncertainties are much, much larger. Another interesting issue in trying to incorporate climate information into planning is that we often tend to plan based on average climate conditions, what in climate science is called the climatology, the long-term means. And for example, this figure shows the long-term average monthly rainfall in one site in Guatemala. And so the figure is showing the monthly rainfall for January, February, March, April. And this type of information is what farmers, for example, take into consideration to decide when to plant a crop. What crop should they plant? Many decisions. Now, an interesting exercise is to take randomly 10 years of this data and plot the observed monthly rainfall of those years that are randomly selected. When you do that, you get this figure. So here, the thick black line is still the long-term average, and the colored lines are the monthly rainfall values for these 10 randomly selected years. So clearly, first conclusion, none of the years behaves like the long-term average. In other words, the probability of a year behaving like an average year is 0. Still, think how many decisions are based on an average year, on the climatology. So we're basing decisions on something that has the probability of 0. Can we do better? And yes, we can. One is by using seasonal climate forecasts. One of the webinars will discuss seasonal climate forecast. Also, very valuable is learning from the past, understanding historical variability and the risks associated with that variability, and understanding what interventions, for example, what farmers did in unfavorable climate years that worked. So learning from the past. Now, learning from the past, understanding those climate risks, issuing early warnings, require climate data with reasonable lengths and coverage. And we know that in many developing countries, there is a lack of long records of climate observations with good spatial coverage. So that's why the IRI started working in combining observations from meteorological stations with satellite information. And another webinar will discuss this subject. Now, informing decisions, development plans with climate knowledge requires a good dialogue. It needs, on the one hand, that practitioners understand the science behind the knowledge. As I said, one of the objectives of this webinar is to help in this process. It also needs scientists asking the right questions to understand the demands. A typical question that a scientist, for example, a climate scientist, asks a user is, what climate information do you need? We believe that a better question is, what problems are you trying to solve? What challenges are you confronting that can be informed with climate knowledge, with climate tools, with climate products? It may seem like a subtle difference, but it's a whole different approach. It's moving from a supply-oriented approach to a demand-driven, a problem-oriented approach. That's all. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the webinars.